Hi there. Just a quick note before we get into today's episode. Super exciting news. We have launched brand shiny, spanking new social media channels across all platforms dedicated to the Hunger and Heart podcast. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, YouTube. If you enjoy the podcast, please do follow us on your social media platform of choice. We will be releasing full episodes as well as clips, teasers, trailers, carousels, the works, you name it. Don't miss out. All right, let's get on with the show.
We had no ocean experience. We had no money. Both of us were, lower socioeconomic. No idea what we were doing.
Can we just pause for a second there? What are you talking about?
So we are talking about a 5,000 kilometer race across the Atlantic Ocean.
It is unusual for me to kind of dedicate an episode to a story in the way we're about to do.
Yeah.
But that's what I want to do. This story of yours is so incredible.
You couldn't even think what had happened. It happened so quickly. It was like basically a freight train just slamming into the boat. So there we were. We were 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land, water rushing into the cabin. To this day, this has been 20 years ago now, with the lowest 30 minutes of my life. Thinking we were going to be rescued and then nothing, and just thinking to ourselves, not to each other, that I really hope my parents understand that this is what I wanted to do, and I hope they forgive me and they understand, and I'm really sorry.
I'm exhausted just listening to this. And this is 4 years and almost unimaginable hardship. I have so many questions, and we won't have time for all my questions. But the biggest question I have is, hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. My guest today is Sarah Kessans. I first met Sarah when I was running TEDx Christchurch, and she gave a talk about eating ketchup on Mars. I've known her for years as a synthetic biologist, as an industrial biotechnologist, as a microgravity researcher, and as an associate professor at the University of Canterbury. And then just a few months ago, I heard her incredible story of rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, and I knew immediately I had to share this story with you. Hold on to your hats, people. We are in for a wild ride. So here you are, my conversation with Sarah Kessans. The premise of it is the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion, which absolutely will be true for your story. It is unusual for me to kind of dedicate an episode to a story in the way we're about to do. Yeah. But that's what I want to do. This story of yours is so incredible, and I would love for you to tell it to me. I know we've got a bunch of imagery, and we're going to include the imagery. So if anyone listening is watching, or if you're listening and you want to watch, there will be a bunch of imagery associated. And I might periodically ask some questions or jump in. So just tell us this cuckoo banana story. What is it and what happened?
Yeah. Brilliant. So I'll start from the beginning. So I grew up in the U.S. You might be able to tell from my accent that I'm not a native Kiwi. I've been here in New Zealand for 13 years now. I came over for a 2-year postdoc, and they haven't kicked me out yet. But I was born in California. Was a Marine Corps brat. My dad was in the Marines, so I was born on the base in Camp Pendleton. And so grew up my earliest years by the ocean, so swimming in the San Luis Ray and swimming with the seals in the Pacific Ocean. And then when my dad got out of the Marine Corps, moved to Indiana in the Midwest of the U.S. Landlocked, yes. So not any oceans or any wilds, anything big water. But I grew up on a farm there in Indiana. And so grew up exploring the fields and the forests. And pretty much my parents allowed me to run a little bit wild, which I really appreciate. And so I was exploring caves. I remember one time when my dad, we were talking about what I'd done on the Saturday, and I was like, oh yeah, I was down on this farm. He's like, that's a couple miles away. And I was like, oh, well, it was cool. But again, that really honed my independence. And my parents sort of got used to me being independent and doing a little bit crazy things. So got really interested in both sort of adventure and the natural world, and really sports. So that was a big thing. I was very much a nerd. I was in band and science fairs, but sports were sort of my one way out of nerddom, I guess. Um, and so going through high school.
Can I just say, that was like back in the day when we did not want to be nerds. Like today,
Yeah,
I feel
I
like,
love being a nerd now. I'm very proudly a nerd now.
right? And I
But back
feel like
then,
even for young people now, being a nerd is cool. When I was in high school, it was the absolute last thing you ever wanted to be was a nerd. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
Great. Yeah. So I played sports through high school. It was a very, very tiny school there in southern Indiana. So played basically many of the sports that I could play: basketball and softball and cross country and track. And so I knew when I went to university, I wanted to continue playing sports. And I was thinking about, walking on to the cross country team or, finding some sort of sport. And just happened to be walking across campus at Purdue University and came upon a large yellow boat, and got introduced to the sport of rowing, and went out for one of the first training for the novice rowers and really just fell in love with the sport. So it was a crew of about 100 people, both men and women, that really became my family over the course of 4 years at Purdue University. And the mental fortitude that it took, the physical stamina that it took, and then just the really like working together, with 8 oars, 8 people and a coxswain, that if you were not in it together and everyone was working as hard as everyone else, it just wasn't going to work. So my rowing team became my family and the sport of rowing became my passion. And so after 4 years at Purdue, also knew that I wanted to continue rowing. I'm 5'6", so I am not Olympic height. And so I knew that the Olympics were probably outside of my reach. But just so happened, sort of after my second year of uni, I had an internship over in the UK and picked up a book on ocean rowing right before my flight back home to Chicago. And I read the book on the flight home. And by the time that I touched down in Chicago, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So again, taking my absolute love of rowing, my passion for adventure, and I knew that was something that I wanted to do just after reading this book.
Can I just ask, as a total ignorant person when it comes to rowing, what is non-ocean rowing? Like, what kind of rowing were you doing previously?
Normal rowing, if you will.
Is that like on a lake, on a?
Yeah, so lakes and rivers. So where we trained at Purdue University was on the Wabash River. And so there's sort of 2 main racing seasons. So in the autumn, the fall season is what we call head races, which are 6 kilometers long. So that's more of an endurance type sport, with races going from about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the course. And then the spring was the main racing season. So those are 2K races, basically just absolutely anaerobic 7 minutes of like, you can't breathe or feel your legs and your lungs are burning. And when you cross that finish line first, it's just like the most amazing feeling. Again, to be able to do it with your best friends was just, again, it's an addiction, really. To be able to, again, to compete at that collegiate level and to be able to win national races was just phenomenal. But yeah, mostly on rivers and lakes, mostly in the landlocked Midwest. So, the closest we got to oceanous conditions if the wind picked up and, there's a little bit of wind, pushing water over the gunnels and things. But yes, rivers and lakes, 2 to 6 kilometer races.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so after my second year at Purdue, I got this sort of idea in my head that I wanted to row across an ocean, which is not a normal thing, and especially not a normal thing for a landlocked university rowing team. And so again, I was really excited about this, having read this book, and the new school year started, and
I'm so sorry, Sarah.
No,
Can I
great.
pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Because I heard you say just before, I read this book about ocean rowing. And then thank you for indulging my ignorance here. You explained to me that normally you're rowing on lakes and rivers and it's 6 kilometers and 2 kilometers. And I thought, okay, well, so you go out in the ocean and, there's a buoy or a buoy or however you want to pronounce it. And you're going around it, but in the ocean. And just now you sort of slipped in like almost casually, like I wanted to row across can we just pause for a second there? What are you talking about?
So we are talking about a 5,000 kilometer race across the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, what did that? What?
So
that was the book you read. You read a book and you're like, I want to go from 6 kilometers to 5,000 kilometers.
Yeah. So even better, the book was so it's entitled "Rowing It Alone" by Deborah Veal, and her race did not go well. And that's what's the silly thing, is that this is what inspired me to go row across an ocean. Is basically, so she and her husband had started out. Turns out her husband wasn't really meant for ocean rowing, and so she kept going by herself. It was intended to be, this great adventure, husband and wife. That's not how it turned out, but she succeeded. She got across.
Was he still on the boat?
No. She didn't just row him around. He got.
Are they still married? It doesn't matter.
But again, it just talked about, so again, a 5,000 kilometer race. So we'll get into the details of our race here in a second. But essentially, the first race of its kind was run in 1997. So this is not a normal thing that most normal people do, obviously. But Sir Che Blythe, who had rowed across the ocean, many decades ago, and I can't remember the exact year, but he had an absolute incredible adventure. So he had what was supposed to be a one-off race in 1997 with a couple dozen boats. Huge success, and so then they started running the race every 2 years. So 2001, 2003, and then the 2005 race is when we first entered the Woodvale Atlantic Rowing Race. But yeah, so my second year of uni, I was coming into my third year of uni, and I brought this idea of rowing across, the Atlantic Ocean from the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco to Antigua and the West Indies, in a fully self-supporting ocean rowing boat across 5,000 kilometers. And so I brought this idea to the 100-strong rowing team at Purdue, and 99 of them thought I was absolutely nuts, which is a fair assessment. Again, we're normally rowing 2K and 6K and going home and sleeping in a stationary dry bed. So it was a bit of an out there idea. But as we went from our autumn training season into our winter training, which is basically in the basement of this field house, it's like sort of grungy, musty, not the most inspiring place. But that's really where the winter training is, where you build up for your spring season. And it was myself who was in what we call the heavyweight boat, and then one of my, at the time, she was not, enemy is a strong word, but we were very strong competitors, named Emily Cole. And so she was the lead of the lightweight boat. I was a very arrogant, cocky kid. And so we often exchanged words and often exchanged heated rivalries on the rowing machines, myself and Emily Cole. But she's very competitive, and I wouldn't shut up about ocean rowing, and she was only one of the ones who would actually listen to me. And so even though we were heated rivals, she was actually listening to my crazy idea. And basically over the course of that winter training season, she actually became enamored with the idea of rowing across the ocean. So even though, the 99 other people on the team thought we were both crazy, I remember basically I'd invited her over for dinner at my house and asked, are you actually interested in this? Is this something that you might actually want to do? We're not just sort of talking about it on the rowing machines. She's like, yep, let's sign up. And so we did. So we were, at the time, 20 and 21 years old, had no idea what we were doing. She was from Chicago. I was from Southern Indiana. We had no, ocean experience. We had no money. Both of us were, lower socioeconomic. No idea what we were doing. But we scraped together $500, and we entered the race and became the only American team and the youngest women's team to enter this Woodvale Atlantic Rowing Race. So that was in 2004.
How much
And
time did you have between when you entered and when the race was going to happen?
we had about 2 years between when we entered and when the race was
Okay,
going to go. Yeah. So
great.
at
So
this
like
point,
quite a good amount
yes,
of time
yeah,
to prep.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
Because there was quite a bit to prep.
I imagine.
Um, so yeah, so again, I was so by the time we'd entered, she had a couple months left, so she was a year ahead of me at Purdue. So she had a couple months before she graduated, and then I had a full year and a bit before I graduated. And so the idea was basically going into that summer, we were going to build our boat. So my dad is a cabinet maker, and so owned a cabinet shop. And so the idea was to buy a boat from the race company, which comes in a kit of 28 sheets of marine plywood, and you essentially cut it out and glue it together and paint it, and that's your boat. And so again, using my dad's cabinetry workshop and some skills that I'd gained along the way, we were very prepared to do that. And then as life happens, there was a train car shortage and strikes in Canada. And so it took actually 3 months for the boat kit to get over from the UK to Indiana. And by that time, that was the whole summer that we'd had to build the boat. So obviously, since we had no idea what we were doing, which I think we really needed to not know what we were doing, otherwise we would have never signed up. But we knew that we needed mentors. And so Tori Murden McClure, who lived in Louisville, Kentucky, not too far from where my parents live. So we first went and visited her. So she holds several ocean rowing world records. And so went to visit her and got both, so she actually went through a hurricane on the North Atlantic and pitch pulled, I think, like 30 some times. So she
Wait, say pitch pull. I'm seeing your hands do this. I know some
Yes.
people might just be listening. Your hands are kind of going over top of each other. What does pitch pull mean?
So if you capsize, essentially, so if you have a long boat and you capsize, you sort of roll towards the gunnel. So essentially, if you're in a sailboat, you roll left or right.
Okay.
Pitch pull is end over end, so bow over stern.
Oh, whoa.
Yes, yeah, real big deal.
Wow. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So Tori had been through quite the adventure and again had several failed attempts before she successfully rowed solo across the North Atlantic Ocean. But she was a phenomenal mentor and she was there in the Midwest, and so really, really helpful. And she connected us to a pair, Tom and John, who owned the American Star, who had rowed across in 2001. And so she connected us to them, and it just so happened that they were looking to sell the American Star at the time that we were looking to buy a boat after we weren't going to build our own boat. So then we ended up spending the summer essentially rowing around the Eagle Creek Reservoir and the Wabash River, just understanding how the boat works before I had to go back to uni. So then we had about a year and a half of training. So that was a lot of essentially fundraising, learning all of our skills. So we spent quite a bit of time down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, going through ocean survival training, first aid courses, radio protocols at sea, just basically any sort of emergency management, emergency planning, and then just sort of ocean yacht master, so nautical skills as well. And then we basically, after I graduated from Purdue, then we spent quite a bit of time down in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and the Florida Keys, rowing around the Florida Keys, which was excellent training. So if you remember 2005, which has been 20 years ago now, that was the hurricane season with Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Katrina, and so some really big, major, devastating goodness, I'm Christchurch based here, hurricanes there in Florida. So we actually were rowing when Hurricane Katrina was coming into Florida. And so we had quite a bit of wind and waves. Fortunately, we were able to get back up into to the port and put the boat safely away when Hurricane Katrina came across Fort Lauderdale. But yeah, it basically.
So I lived in Florida for 8 years, and the major difference between like an earthquake and a hurricane, other than that one is land and one is rain and wind, but there's a major temporal difference, which is an earthquake just happens like kind of out of the blue. A hurricane, you can see it coming for like ages, and you've got time to prep and board up your windows and whatever. So did you know that hurricane was coming and go out kind of on purpose at the edge of it to test yourself with the wind and the waves?
No, so that wasn't the intention. So we were actually down in Key Largo. So we were about 60 kilometers, or 60 nautical miles away from our port when we were starting to see the weather faxes come across that there was a tropical storm building. And the intention was for us to keep going further south. But obviously, we didn't want to be stuck, in the Keys, which are basically no opportunity to get away from a hurricane. So we cut that training run short, and then coming back through Biscayne Bay, which is generally more protected than the open ocean where we had been rowing. It took us about 4 hours to get through what should have been a 40-minute row, just because of the wind that was against us. Again, excellent training. But no, that was not the intention. Training in Fort Lauderdale was not. We weren't meant to be there for hurricane season, but it was good training. Like I said, to be there, and again with that 4-hour stint trying to get through Biscayne Bay, it was excellent teamwork and sort of character building, if you will, for what we were to face later in the race. So really great training in Florida. Lots of excellent support that we got down there from the yachting community. So we had several sponsors that we successfully brought on board, quite literally. And so we raised about $150,000 to pay for the boat and for our travel and insurance and all of our training. So it was a really phenomenal 2 years and really full on for two Midwest kids that had no idea what they were doing. And so getting over to the start line in November of 2005 was just an absolute dream come true. Because here we were, we're the only American team. So, no one else in the U.S. had any idea really what we were getting ourselves into. And so being able to go over to the starting line and then, to be able to have fellowship with the other ocean rowing teams, talk with the race organizers. We went through scrutineering to make sure that our boat was kitted out and we had all of the emergency gear and all the training that we needed. And we were one of the most prepared boats. And that was such an incredible feeling to be one of the younger teams, to be so prepared. It was a really point of pride for both Emily and myself that, it's like we started out, we had no idea what we were doing. And then again, through our teamwork and our support networks, to be able to get over there to the start line was just an absolute dream come true. And so again, hurricane season was supposed to be over by sort of October. That's typical. And so the race was supposed to start at the end of November. And so we were over there for 2 weeks prior to the start of the race, just making sure that we had all our supplies and, again, going through all the procedures for the race and making sure, we were all ready to go. And about a week before the race was supposed to start, the Canary Islands had their first tropical storm in 15 years. So again, this is sort of mid to end of November. Hurricane season should have been over, 2 months ago. And basically the wind and the waves that were striking the Canary Islands there were such that, the ferries couldn't dock and parts of the marina were destroyed. And it was not exactly the race start that all of us were expecting. So this is the fourth race of its kind.
Inauspicious, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Just a little bit of a harbinger of what was to come. So, but again, this is the fourth race of its kind. Previous 3 races, the worst thing to happen to people is, they break an oar, or, it's a fully self-supporting race. So there, your water maker might break down and you have to get, supported. But it wasn't tropical storms. And so having a tropical storm right before the start of the race is like, that's not a normal thing that usually happens. So the race was delayed for a little bit, for a couple days, essentially just to let the wind and the waves die down such that it wasn't going to blow us back to the start line. And so the race was delayed a couple days, but then the actual start of the race was record-breaking weather. It was just absolutely gorgeous. So the race starts at noon, and all of us, there's just this incredible vibe, excitement, saying goodbye to your support teams, and then literally stepping off the dock onto your boat knowing that the next time you're going to stand on land is 5,000 kilometers west was just unreal. I mean, we had rowed there in Florida, we'd rowed away from land, but we knew we were coming back to land, a couple of days after that. And so, yeah, stepping off that dock after, 2 years of training and pouring our hearts and souls into this, again, the next dream come true is just starting the race and just, so many emotions. The two of us, again, having come from, being sort of competitive enemies to being, as close as sisters, was just a phenomenal feeling to be able to do that. So we're just on top of the world.
I just have to say, if you are listening to this and not watching it, when you're done listening to it, just go to some visual format. If we got the video on Spotify or on YouTube or whatever, you just have to see Sarah's face. Sarah, you have the biggest smile ever. Like, it looks like the top of your head's going to split off. Like, I could just see how important this moment was to you. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yes. So it was record-breaking weather for, the first day. And again, I just want to talk about, the emotions that we have that first couple hours. Because again, this is not something we had ever done. We'd read a lot. We had really great mentors, but really, I mean, there's nothing that prepares you to just row away from land for a whole ocean. And so we essentially, we rowed together the first couple hours. And then the majority of the race, we were on a 2-hour on, 2-hour off schedule. So for 24 hours, you were on for 12 of that. So 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So 2 hours on the oars, 2 hours resting and eating and doing the navigating and talking to the support teams. And so essentially, after we rowed together for a little bit, then basically I took an hour-long break just to get some dinner, and then we started our 2-hour shifts. And so essentially when I started my 2-hour shift, is right at sunset. And so Emily had her dinner, and we're talking about how excited we were, and then we were sort of in it. And so we'd rowed quite a ways from land, and then it was starting to get dark, and Emily, she's like, all right, well, I'm going to take my first 2-hour shift and go in the cabin and get some rest. And then the emotions really started to hit. And it's like, what are we doing? Are we sort of nuts? It's like, this is, yes, definitely our dream, but this is crazy. And then, as the sun sort of completely set, this just total peace came over us. And I looked in the water, and just every oar stroke looked like diamonds dripping off of my oars. And so there's phosphorescence in the water there that first evening. And I just had this feeling of overwhelming peace that, this is our dream, and we're out here, and everything is going to be amazing. And that's how the first evening started.
I feel so moved to hear, like, I just imagine being out there and, doing all the planning and all the prep, and then actually getting like several hours away from land and going, holy shit, with every oar stroke, like, there's less opportunity to change our minds here. And
Correct.
like, we're actually doing it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this is a very silly reminder. Nothing like what you do. But this is so silly. I went on the Kaikoura whale watching thing. And when you got on the whale watching thing, well, when I did it, they had a screen there that showed the depth of the ocean below you in terms of sky towers.
Oh, wow.
And so you leave the dock, and the dock is already pretty deep. It's maybe like a third of a sky tower or whatever. And then you start to go out. And the reason that there are whales there all year round is because there's this huge canyon, like straight offshore, that the whales kind of hang out in all the time. So instead of doing their normal migration, there are whales there all the time.
Yeah.
So you leave the dock, and it's like a third of a sky tower. And then you start to go out to sea, and maybe it's like a half a sky tower, 3/4 of a sky tower. And then you go over the lip of the underwater canyon. And I'm watching the screen, and it's like, like 17 sky towers. And I was like, holy shit. And the thing is, like, nothing had changed in my reality. Like, I was still just on a boat on the top of the water. But all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, there's like 17 sky towers of water beneath me. And I like, that's what I'm imagining. There's a thing there on a much greater scale, obviously. This thing of like, we're adding sky towers underneath us very rapidly. And then the shift from that to the like, we are out here with this phosphorescence and this peace and this weather, doing this thing, that having this experience that so few people on the planet will ever get to have. And I just imagine the connection to it, and the joy is probably not even the right word, but just the fullness of it.
Yeah,
Just,
the
it
the
moves me so
richness of
much.
the experience,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm so glad we had, and I say we, Emily was in the cabin, but and she would have had other moments, as well, but like to have that, and I'm so glad we had that at the beginning of the race,
Mhm.
because that did not last.
Okay, keep going. What
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah. So the first couple days were decent weather, and sort of getting into the 2 hours on and 2 hours off, and the night shifts were real fun when you'd call out a 10-minute warning to swap on the oars, and then you'd call out the 5-minute warning, and it was like, come on, you need to get on the oars. So yeah, those first sort of midnight to 2 and 2 to 4 a.m. shifts were pretty rough, but we sort of got into it that first week. And then we started having some weather, little bits at the start. So sort of for the first 4 weeks, we had a little bit of inclement weather that basically the wind picked up and started pushing us back towards the islands. And so when that happened, so it wasn't dangerous, it was just annoying. We were very competitive people. We were out there to break a world record. And to have this, incessant wind just trying to force us back was just really frustrating. And so when the wind was strong enough that we couldn't fight it, essentially what we did is we deployed what's called a sea anchor, which is sort of like a big parachute that deploys underwater, and that keeps you with the wind and the waves. And it will prevent you from going too far against the wind. So it sort of holds you in place. Definitely not going down, 17 sky towers to the bottom of the ocean. But kept us, from sort of getting, perpendicular to the wind, and prevented us from going back. So there were a couple days, those first couple weeks that we spent on sea anchor, which were really frustrating, but not dangerous. But otherwise, those first 4 weeks, really just getting into to sort of the routine of it. And, there are really cool things. There are dolphins and whales and sea turtles and some really neat, beautiful sunrises and sunsets for those first 4 weeks. And sort of those first 4 weeks were kind of what we expected. And then we went through Christmas. And so again, we were 22 and 23 years old, and that was the first Christmas we'd spent away from our families. And so I had gotten Emily a Dr. Pepper, which was her favorite drink, and it was just the little things to celebrate together. So went through Christmas, went through New Year's, and set off flares to celebrate the New Year. And then the weather changed. So, basically from New Year's. So again, this is January. Hurricane season should have been over 2-3 months ago by this point. And so there were two storms. One was Hurricane Epsilon, right? So they name hurricanes A to Z, and then they start doing Greek letters. So this is Epsilon now. And then Tropical Storm Zeta. So for 2 weeks, basically, there were several tropical storms that were sort of in the sort of north of the mid-Atlantic. So just north of where the fleet was. So there were 26 boats in the fleet in 2005, and the majority of us got caught in these tropical depressions, essentially. So as you've got these cyclonic winds that even if you're not in the thick of the hurricane or the tropical storm, are just pushing these cyclonic winds on the fleet. And so all of us were on sea anchor quite a bit. And so those last couple weeks after the 1st of January, we never had wind under about 30 knots. And then we never had waves under about 10 meters. So if you think of a 10-meter wave, this is a, 2-story building here. And those were the waves that we were getting consistently. So the first couple of days that we had these, we knew Hurricane Epsilon was out there. We knew we had these cyclonic winds that were, coming from one direction and a different direction. So they're just really messy waves, and they make rowing really frustrating. So we did spend, a bit of that time on sea anchor, and then it would get a little bit better, but never calm seas, but just a little bit better. So again, the first couple of days is like, okay, there's storms. We knew there were going to be storms. We can get through these. And then after the fourth or the fifth day is like calling our shore support team saying, this is the weather that we're seeing. And they're like, yep, no, that tracks with what our forecast said they would be. This would be on a Wednesday, and by Friday, you're going to be in the clear by Friday. It's like, okay, well, we can last a couple more days. This is frustrating, but we'll get through it.
Can I just ask, how many weeks in are you at this point?
So we're about 5 weeks in now.
And how long is the whole thing supposed to take?
So that's really dependent on the team. It could be anywhere from sort of 60 to 100 days.
And so so you're about halfway. So you're like in the middle of the, like literally in the middle of the ocean.
Middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
So you're not, it's not like, oh, we just started, we could just turn back if things get bad. Like you're out in the middle. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So they're 26 boats. And by this point, we're spread out about 1,000 kilometers apart. So the front of the fleet is far ahead. The back of the fleet is quite far behind. And then there's 2 support yachts that sort of follow the fleet. So one's sort of with the front pack, one's sort of with the backpack. So keep that in mind. But we're all very spread out. But all of us, sort of the front and the mid pack, are dealing with these storms. So it gets to Friday. We're like, you said it was supposed to be better weather. It doesn't look like it's better weather. Like, oh, really sorry. By Monday though, it should be much better. All right, well, we can hang on till Monday. And so again, we'd fight the waves and, sit on sea anchor when we needed to, and kept rowing. And we'd try to row 2 together to try to fight some of the waves. It was exhausting, but again, we're very, dedicated, motivated people. And so we just kept going. And then we got to Monday, and one of my favorite, my least favorite, but it's favorite now, looking back, calls with our shore support team. And they were really excited because they're meteorologists, real trained. They were, really excited about these really cool weather patterns. They were like, you're in, record waves in the mid-Atlantic. They're over 11 meters average. And I was like, we know. We see them. Here's some photos of them.
You're like, we're glad you're excited. It's not quite as exciting to row them.
And eventually it got to the point where they're like, we're like, so when does this get better? Like, don't sugarcoat it. Just let us know. And they're like, about 500 miles from Antigua, it gets better. And so we were approaching halfway. Then we finally get to halfway. And we've got another 1,500 miles to row. So we've got another 1,000 miles of this weather that we've been battling for 2 weeks. And yeah, it wasn't great. But again, it's just one of those things, both Emily and I had been very competitive people in a range of different sports. And again, we knew each other really, really well. We trained together, for 5 years at Purdue, 2 years for our ocean rowing. And, we're just trying to keep each other's morale as high as we could, even though it was so frustrating. We knew, that wasn't going to do us any good if we just complained and vented and, whinged about it. It's like, well, no, we just gotta get out. And then just before I get into the exciting fun parts, talking about your Sky Tower adventure. So this is one of my stories the parts of the story that one of my friends really loves me telling. So I wanted to make sure it got on this podcast. Otherwise, she'll say it was an omission. So just thinking about how deep the ocean was. So we're rowing, and we're not going that fast. And so we have anti-fouling paint to stop the sort of algae and barnacles growing at the bottom of the boat. But because we're not, a racing yacht, some of the barnacles and algae do start to grow. And so the first time that we decided we needed to clean the bottom of the boat, which entails getting out of the boat and scraping off the algae, in the water. Basically, on the shore, we had decided both Emily and I would take turns with scraping the bottom of the boat. And so I sort of drew the straw to do it the first time. But when you look over the edge of the gunnel into, 1,000 sky towers down, there's nothing below you. And it's spooky because you can see the light as it filters down, and then you just can't see anything. And, you see the little triggerfish that are eating the barnacles, and, if triggerfish are there, then there are bigger fish and sharks. And so it was quite spooky. And so basically made a deal with Emily that I would jump over the side and I would scrape, and she would be on shark watch. And if she saw anything bigger than a triggerfish, she, tapped me on the shoulder and pulled me back up. So it was good. Again, we had really good trust with our team. And so finally worked up the courage and jumped over the side, and just as fast as I could, just scrape. And then, of course, there's all these barnacles, which are really tasty to the triggerfish, and the triggerfish are eating them. And so I'm trying not to think about how many fish are around me. So I'd scrape and then look around and scrape and then look around. So got into a little bit of a rhythm there. And then this one time I scraped and looked around, and there's just this giant piece of poo floating in the water, which did not come from the triggerfish and did not come from me. And it took me about half a second to try to figure out what's going on. So I reached up over the gunnel and I was like, did you just take a poo? So not only was Emily not on Shark Watch, she had basically shat on my head.
Oh my gosh. This is your sister, your best friend. You're like, we're doing our best to keep our morale up. We're supporting each other through everything. We're shitting on each other's heads. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Anyway, excellent. So yes, again, I think one might describe that experience as inauspicious, but up to you how you want to interpret it. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So now we are 6 weeks in. So we are 46 days in, 45 days in. Again, we've had 2 weeks of inclement weather where the wind was over 30 knots and gusting much stronger. The waves were 10-meter average. Again, not ideal. And it gets to day 45, and this is when Tropical Storm Zeta is really starting to bear down on us. So it's about 200 miles away from us, just pushing these massive tropical depressions. And so when waves are average of 10 meters, you get these rogue waves, which are much bigger. So those, basically we called them waterfall waves that would just break over the top of us and were quite dangerous. But up until then, we'd get these waterfall rogue waves, but we were still safe. And so basically we got to basically about midnight on the night of 15th of January. So I was finishing up a 10 p.m. to midnight shift, such that the waves started getting really dangerous, just breaking over us consistently to where it wasn't safe to be out on deck. And so made the call to ship the oars, put out the sea anchor, and get inside the cabin just to wait out what we thought was, going to be just a little bit of rougher weather, and, we'd see how it was the next morning. So we're two of us in this tiny cabin. It's a 2-meter long cabin, just basically being rocked around like the inside of a sort of a bucking bronco. It's just sweaty and gross and not very nice. But went through the night, not much sleep. Went through the next morning, and it was still really rough weather. So again, at the edge of this sort of tropical storm. And so went through the morning, then essentially started getting bored, if you will, and just, cooped up and, wondering what's happening. So, we talked to our shore support team, and they reiterated that, it's pretty shit weather. So then essentially tried to call some of the other teams because we knew they'd be sitting on sea anchor as well. We weren't able to get in touch with anybody, but that wasn't, unusual because not everyone had their satellite phone on all the time. So we just tried to call the support yacht because usually they had a really good morale boosting word for us whenever we would call them. And so called them up, and rather than a really kind, encouraging word, they're like, "Hey, we're really busy, call us back later." And then they hung up. Like, that's not normal. Okay. Guess we'll call back later and see what's going on. So that was about 2:00 in the afternoon. And so a couple hours later, about 4:00 that afternoon, Emily had the satellite phone in her hand. And so at this point, we'd been on sea anchor for about 18 hours. So cabin is completely airtight and watertight if we have essentially the caps to our ventilating fans closed. And so we're starting, again, it's really hot, oxygen deprived now. So essentially about 4:00 that afternoon, we took the ventilating caps out of those ventilating fans such that we could get just some airflow. So that the way that they're designed, if a wave hits up against them, no water comes in. Now, if you're inverted, it's a different story. So keep that in mind. So about 4:00 in the afternoon, Emily had the satellite phone in her hand, getting ready to call the support yacht back to understand what might be going on. And that's when we just got slammed in our port side and flipped upside down. That you couldn't even think what had happened. It happened so quickly. It was like basically a freight train just slamming into the boat. Again, we'd felt powerful waves previously, but this was, unlike anything that we'd ever felt, and just instantly upside down. And so the boat is designed to be self-riding. We had 200 liters of ballast in the bottom of the boat that should have flipped us right back over. But basically, because we'd taken those inner caps to the ventilating fans out, now we essentially had 2 bathtub faucets, like these fire hoses, essentially just pouring water into the cabin. And so the weight of our bodies and the water that was rushing into the cabin, we did not self-right. So there we were 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land, water rushing into the cabin. Again, I could not ask for a better teammate than Emily Cole to be in this situation. We trained for emergencies. We kept calm. Emily was just a rock. Basically, really quickly tried to block her vent, basically by shoving some clothes into her vent, stop the water coming from in her vent. I tried to do the same on my side. That's actually where our bulkhead-mounted VHF radio was. So I actually started getting electrically shocked. So we flipped up all the electronics and stopped the water from coming into my vent. And so then there we were in a half-full cabin full of water. So our previously ship-shaped, beautiful cabin was now essentially a soup bowl of all of our gear and a non-working satellite phone now that was floating around. And so it took us, about 30 seconds of deliberation, again, through all of our emergency training to understand that, yes, we are not self-righting. We are 1,400 miles from the nearest dry land. This is an emergency situation. And so we flipped the switch on our EPIRB. And so, again, I cannot
An EPIRB, for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, so emergency position indicating radio beacon. So absolutely anyone going out to sea or really any adventure, do not go out without an EPIRB because that actually takes the search out of search and rescue. And so essentially that was the only means of communication we had at that point. So now that we are flipped upside down, our racing beacon was no longer tracking us. Our satellite phone was out. Our radio was out. So essentially the only means of communication we had were our EPIRB and a handheld radio, which is only good if you're close to a boat. So yeah, we flipped the switch on the EPIRB, and the thing about the EPIRB is it's a one-way signal. So there's a little strobe light on it, shows that the battery is working, and it's got about 48 hours of battery life, but otherwise you can't call and say, hi, could you come pick us up? It's just, we really hope that someone is listening to the signal. So about 4:30 in the afternoon is when we flipped the switch on the EPIRB, and then at that point, we didn't know if the boat was actually going to stay afloat or not. And so we knew we weren't going to be able to stay inside the cabin, that we were going to have to get out. But the way that the hatch to exit the cabin is positioned, it was half full of water and half not. So completely water filled on the outside and then air on the inside. And the physics of that is such that you can't open the hatch unless there's water equalizing the pressure on both sides. Which meant that we had to take the shorts and the clothes out of these vents, let the cabin completely fill up with water, took one last breath, opened up the hatch, swam out from underneath the boat, and then got on top of the upturned hull, which is still 10-meter waves.
And what time is it at this point?
So this time it's about 4:30 in the afternoon. So we've got about an hour of daylight at this point. And I mean, it's not
this seems
warm.
like a really bad idea.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, keep going. I'm scared. Keep going.
So I swam out, and I didn't have any problems, and so I'm out on outside of the hole, basically, waiting for Emily, and she should have been right behind me. She was, we had this plan, and it took more than a minute. She actually got caught up in one of the emergency throw lines, and had she not been able to untangle herself, she wouldn't have been able to get out either. It wasn't even an easy thing getting out of the cabin, but we were able to untangle 2 life jackets. Basically, Emily got on top of the hull. So the wave that hit us was so violent that basically everything on deck was ripped off. So our life raft, which had been strapped, in 3 different places to the deck, was gone. Basically, everything on deck is absolutely gone. So we did not have a life raft. We did have emergency gear in the bow cabin if we needed it. But at that point, we just wanted to make sure that we were okay. So life raft totally gone. So we basically had our life jackets on. We harnessed ourselves to each other such that, if we lose the boat, at least we have each other and, we can float with our life jackets. I tied the EPIRB to my hand so that wasn't going anywhere. We had our handheld VHF radio. And so then we both got on top of the upturned hull, which is like a giant surfboard. And there we were, about 5 o'clock in the evening. Had no idea what to expect. So again, we had inclement weather there for 2 weeks. And so the first boat to capsize in that inclement weather was the Irish crew. And so they got picked up by the support yacht in 8 hours. And so, again, thinking positively.
Did you know that?
We did, yes.
Okay.
Because again, so we would get, continued news from the support yacht. And so we knew the Irish crew was safe on board the support yacht, out of the race and really disappointed, but they were fine. They had capsized and, their boat was damaged, but they were safe and they got picked up in 8 hours. So again, we're sitting on top of our boat and we're like, all right, well, we got 8 hours and then we're going to get picked up. That was the idea. And so again, that we had to have that hope that, this is going to be fun. This is not ideal. This is not what we planned, but we're prepared and we're going to get through this. And so went through sunset and got dark.
And still horrific weather.
Still horrific weather. Yeah.
Huge waves, still
and
wind.
we were still on sea anchor. And so we were just upside down on sea anchor. And so for better or worse, the waves were still coming over the top of us rather than hitting us into the side. And so the way that we were sitting on the boat, essentially, so I was sitting closer to the bow, and so the waves would hit me first, but I was out of the water. And then Emily was sitting towards the stern, and so she didn't get the brunt of the waves, but she was always essentially in the water. And so, so basically the waves would hit over the top of me. They would rip me off the boat. Sometimes they'd rip Emily off the boat. And then we would basically crawl back on top of the boat and just, again, assess that we were both okay. And, we had all our limbs and we weren't broken and we weren't, we were sore and tired, but we weren't damaged. And again, being the people that we were, we were telling jokes and singing songs and trying to keep each other's morale as high as we possibly could. Sort of 4 hours goes by and 6 hours goes by. And again, we get knocked off the boat and pull ourselves back on. And sort of, gets to 8 hours. We're like, all right, we're ready for the support yacht. It should be here anytime now. And then 10 hours goes by and 12 hours goes by and we're getting really tired and really sore and we've run out of jokes. We didn't have any good jokes to begin with. We're not good singers, so, it's getting real dire at this point. And it's, starting to get cold. At this point, I'm wearing a pair of shorts and my life jacket. Emily's got our one jacket that was in the cabin. If we needed to, we could have gone back and gotten our survival suits in the bow cabin. But at that point, we thought it was just better to stay on top of the boat and make sure that we were safe. Starting to get quite cold. Sort of 13 hours goes by and we're really ready to be rescued. And then finally, sort of 14 hours into it, we saw a light on the horizon. And we had not seen a ship for 2 weeks because you don't send ships out in tropical storms. That's not something that most people do. So seeing any sort of light that was not us was really exciting. And so we sort of watched it, and it's sort of starting to get a little bit brighter and to the point where we could actually see one of its navigation lights, which meant, it was definitely getting closer to us. So we were on top of the world. We're like, all right, definitely going to be saved. We got this boat's coming towards us. But if you sat up on the boat, basically you got knocked off of the boat. So, we sort of watched that it was coming closer and then hunkered down a little bit. And so after about 10 minutes, we started to get up again and just sort of look and see how close the ship was getting to us. and then the light was gone. So we were gonna be rescued, and there was definitely a ship, and then no ship, then no lights, no nothing at all. And again, being the positive people that we were, we thought, they're big waves. We'll just be, we'll be at the trough of a wave, and they'll be at, at a different, wavelength, and we just can't see them. But for half an hour, there was just nothing. And to this day, this has been 20 years ago now, the lowest 30 minutes of my life. And again, there were no songs and no jokes, thinking we were going to be rescued, and then nothing, and just thinking, to ourselves, not to each other. And the thoughts that were going through my head is that I really hope my parents understand that this is what I wanted to do. And I hope they forgive me and they understand, and I'm really sorry. And that was what was going through my head is, there may not be a rescue, and I have to come to terms with that. And yeah, that was pretty rough 30 minutes, but spoiler alert, we survived.
Okay, again, if you're just listening to this, I'm sitting here in tears. I like, you're here in front of me, and I still don't believe it. So, okay, so darkest half an hour, then what happens?
And so then we see a light in the sky, and we had not seen a plane for 46 days. And so, again, we'd seen this light on the horizon, that we thought was a boat, and then it disappeared. And so we're both sort of looking at each other as like, this is a real thing that you see. This is not some hallucination that, like, in our darkest hour, we're making up this light in the sky thing. And we both confirmed, like, no, it's a real thing. And eventually it started circling around us and came right over the top of us and dropped an orange smoke flare. And these things are so bright that if you look at them, you go blind. But of course, we were just staring at it. Again, this is something that is real. Like, this is a real thing that came out of the sky, and they see us, and they dropped it, and they know we're here. And it was literally a beacon of hope. And so this, it's still dark, but this plane, now it goes away from us, and we're like, but they know we're here. And so it goes in the direction of the ship that we had seen. And eventually this ship comes back into view. So again, it's just lights at this point. But again, this is a real thing. There's a plane. It's, clearly communicating to the ship. This is a rescue. This is a real thing. Okay, now we can start actually bringing back a little bit of hope to this situation. And so it was still quite a ways away from us. And we knew, based on, the support yacht and things, that it was going to take about an hour based on where it was to get to us. But again, we've got this orange smoke flare. We've got this plane that's circling in the sky. And it's like, okay, this is a thing that's going to happen. And so, yeah, so it takes about an hour, but now it's starting to get sort of this gray twilight. And again, the way that we're sitting on the boat, I'm facing away from where the ship is coming from, and Emily's facing towards it. And she's mostly blind anyways, and she's missing a contact lens. And so she starts rubbing her eyes. She's, what is this coming towards us? It's just sort of this gray twilight. So it's, again, and she's blind. And so based on what the lights had been, I'm thinking a Coast Guard cutter or a tanker ship or something just massive. And so I turn around, and all I see are these two masts just absolutely swaying in these giant waves. I was like, fantastic. We are marooned mid-Atlantic, and now we have a pirate ship to deal with. That's awesome. So again, it's this giant tall ship. So this brig, double-masted, like, giant sailing vessel is what is coming to rescue us. And again, at this point, we're just on top of the world to see other people. And so
you're like, I don't care if it's actual pirates. Like, give me the peg leg, give me the parrot, give me the hook. I'm good.
Pretty much. And we're both joking. It was like, oh, we'll wait for the next ship. But yeah, an incredible crew. So it's a tall ship called the Stavros Niarchos. It's actually a sail training vessel. So out of the 60 sailors on board, 48 were just learning how to sail. We'd actually caught them in their halfway celebration. So all the boys were in coconut shell bras for their celebration, far away from the tropical storm when the all ships rescue beacon came out. And so Captain Darren Nags, who's 35 years old at the time, now has the reputation of being able to pick up women anywhere. But yeah, an incredible rescue. So they came towards us, threw out a life raft. We basically climbed off of our third teammate, so the American Fire, who we'd been through so much together. I mean, Emily and I were close, but we were just as close to our baby, the Fire. But climbed off of the boat, and then basically got hauled up to the ship. And then so it was a Coast Guard C-130, which I also owe my life to, that was circling over the top of us. And seeing the footage of the C-130 video afterwards, it was like an out-of-body experience that we actually experienced this. So we're climbing up into the ship while the ship is just yawing all over the place. So we're on the water, and then we're 10 meters off the water as basically this ship is just yawing in these waves. But managed to climb the ladder up into to the warm arms and blankets of the crew. At this point, again, I'm only wearing a life jacket, and so they asked to take my life jacket, and I was like, I don't know you very well yet. We'll wait for that. But yeah, just absolutely phenomenal rescue, joint rescue by the crew of the U.S. Coast Guard C-130 and the Stavros. Let us so the best porridge and tea I've ever eaten in my life. Let us get showers and then call our families. And so basically when we flip the switch on the EPIRB, that immediately sends a signal to the U.S. Coast Guard that then signaled to the race organizers, who confirmed that they could no longer reach us on our sat phone and our tracking beacon was out, so that yes, this was an emergency situation. So put out the all ships rescue beacon. And so by maritime law, the closest ship has to come to your aid. The Stavros was the closest ship to us. And so for 14 hours, basically cut across into the tropical storm to come try to find us. And unbeknownst to us, because again, the Coast Guard couldn't get a hold of us, race organizers couldn't get a hold of us. And so they had actually cleared out 2 spots in their freezer for our bodies, because they were not expecting us to be alive. So the fact that they saw 2, very excited and moving women was a very exciting thing for both us and for them. So yeah, got showers and were able to call our families, who for 16 and a half hours thought we were gone. Because again, so basically the Coast Guard had sent out a plane at 4:30 in the afternoon, couldn't find us, it got dark, sent the plane back and told our parents that they'd try again in the morning. And so for 16 and a half hours, they had no idea. And my sister, my younger sister, she's 3 years younger than me, thought I was dead. And so my poor mother thought she'd lost one daughter at sea, and the other daughter couldn't live without her sister. And so it was not a great night for my parents. So when I called my dad, and then I called my mom, and I was like, can you just talk to Emmy to make, tell her I'm okay? And my mom's like, you call your sister right now. She thinks you're dead. So got to call our parents. And then we became part of the Blue Watch. So they integrated us into the team. And we spent 11 days on board learning how to sail a brig with the people that saved our lives, and went around the Caribbean getting to tell our story. Just a phenomenal crew that obviously we owe our lives to, and got a pretty great adventure out of it. But then at the end of that, we had the opportunity to go to Antigua to see the sport yacht. So out of the 26 boats in the race, 19 of us capsized, and 7 of us did not self-right. So out of the 7 boats that did not self-right, 5 were picked up by the support yacht. 1 crew was got picked up by a tanker ship headed to Gabon, Africa, and basically plucked their life raft on deck and said, we'll be in port in a couple days. And we got a Caribbean adventure on a tall ship. But getting to go to Antigua, and with all the other crews that also didn't finish, it was a real reckoning. And, obviously the race organizers, they had never had a race like that before. But it was one of those things that we met up with some of the other teams that didn't finish. And so when we called the support yacht the day that we capsized, the reason why they were too busy to chat was they're actually rescuing the Kiwi crew who capsized 8 hours before us. And they've got a story as well. So Tara and Ian actually got attacked by a great white shark. So they were actually taking on water when they got hit by a rogue wave. And so, yeah, so the support yacht was rescuing them. And so they're in Antigua, and all credit to him. Ian wanted nothing to do with ocean rowing anymore. But Tara is an Ironman triathlete, so she's from Auckland. She wanted to go again. And then there's another woman, Jo Davies, who was on a force boat that got hurt and had to be taken off. So all of us are there in the pub in Antigua, talking about these horrible, things that we'd just been through. But then all of us still really determined.
Please don't.
To go out there again.
No, Sarah.
Well,
I feel like you take the wrong lessons from things.
I probably do. Yeah.
When you first read the book, it should have been stay home, curled up by the fire. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, so we get home. We were all the news for the next couple of days. We were on the Today Show. They flew us to New York. It was a real, eye opener from going, in our bare feet around, and picking coconuts and mangoes off the Caribbean islands, to February in New York, to talking to Katie Couric after we'd almost died. A little bit of a shock to the system. But we did, and it was, again, immediately in these interviews, we said, no, we want to go back out there sometime and finish what we started. But obviously we still had no money and no idea what we were going to do with our lives. And again, it was a real couple months of, I say now reflection, but it was depression. Again, we thought we knew what we were doing with our lives. And again, I was a very cocky rower that thought she was hot shit. And then the world showed me otherwise. And so it was very much a time of reflection. Fortunately, got into a PhD program at Arizona State. And then Emily actually got a coaching position at Arizona State as well. And it's a longer story than I'll tell now, but they actually found our boat washed up on an island called Desrad, about 40 miles from where we were trying to finish anyways. And so it took about a year of bureaucracy, but we were able to get the boat back. And so essentially there in Phoenix, we were repairing the boat and trying to get her back in working order, preparing to attempt the 2009 race. Because again, we were going to get back out there and do this again. When about 2 months prior to the 2007 race, we got a call from the race organizer, and they knew that we wanted to go again. And so there was a fours boat. So we were rowing a pairs boat. We were fixing up a pairs boat. There was a fours boat owned by a charity called the Meningitis Trust that wanted to offer the boat to us if we wanted to go out in 2007. So we recruited Tara, the woman from Auckland, who wanted to go again. Like I said, Ian wanted nothing to do with it, but then we recruited Jo, and so we became the 4 women who didn't finish in 2005. We came back as Team Unfinished Business. So rather than 2 years to prepare, we had 2 months to prepare. But we knew what we were doing. So basically got all our gear together, raised a little bit of money, and went over and started the race in 2007. And it was really funny because whereas the 2005 race was a really nice calm day when we started, 2007 was pretty choppy. Again, not dangerous, but to the point where, again, we did row away from shore thinking, what the hell are we getting ourselves into? Like, we know what we're getting ourselves into. And again, to all credit to our families, they knew that this is what our dream was. And so they supported us, hesitantly, but they knew that this is what we were going to do. And, I had the support of my PhD advisor to take off a couple months during my PhD. And we had the most amazing time, and we called it Summer Camp UFB. Our unfinished business foursome was just phenomenal. Again, we were swimming with dolphins. We were just absolutely watching the most amazing, stars and sunsets and sunrises, and being able to do it as a 4, 2 people on and 2 people off was a totally different thing. And poor Tara and Jo, had to listen to all of Emily and my singing. But just really, really incredible time. And to be able to do it, the four of us who didn't finish in '05. So we came across the line in 51 days. The previous women's world record was 68, so we beat the world record by 17 days, and came across the line and immediately pulled off the U in the end to become finished business at the end of a very long and torturous 4 years to finally, to achieve our dream.
Holy, I'm exhausted just listening to this. And this is 4 years and like almost unimaginable hardship. I have so many questions and we won't have time for all my questions. But the biggest question I have is I just sit and listen to you and think about the mental fortitude that it takes to do what you did. And I hear you say over and over that, you and Emily were building up each other's morale. Did you deliberately and explicitly train that? Or was that just you both had the instinct that that was the right thing to do? Like, how do you get that? Is it something trainable? How do you get that kind of mental fortitude to not only just set aside the mental fortitude necessary for just rowing 2 hours, rest, maps, whatever, eat 2 hours, rowing 2 hours, like that alone takes a huge amount. But then the mental fortitude of like, oh, and now it's getting hard, and now we're going against the wind and the waves, and now we have to put the sea anchor, and now it's getting depressing, and now we've been capsized, and now we're probably going to die. Like just the blows over and over and over to your inner sense of like calm. How do you build up the capacity and reserve to deal with that?
I think like many things in life, doing things wrong at first. Because again, Emily and I weren't friends when we started. We were competitors. And again, we had a very healthy respect for each other. So it wasn't that we hated each other. It's just we weren't friends and we didn't know each other. And so that summer in Florida was a trial by fire. We are very different people. We have very different personalities. And again, when it started coming to things like boat maintenance or how to, approach a sponsor, we often had very different approaches to those things, which blew up like massively. And so there were times, and it was one of those things that for quite a bit of the summer, we were living on a couch and a twin mattress in the living room of a friend's house. So there was no privacy. There was no like, I'm just going to go to my room and shut the door and I don't have to see you. It's like we were with each other the entire summer. We're rowing together for 8 hours a day, and then we're trying to go to a sponsor, and then we're trying to learn star charts. And it was just a very stressful summer. And there was a lot of things that did not work, and we were not building up each other's morale. We were doing the opposite of that. It was like, I hate you. This is stupid. What are we doing? Like, I want to quit. But it was going through those trials by fire that like, we have two choices. We can quit and we can go our separate ways, and we can say, all of the sunk costs, we're just going to forget about them. This is not worth it anymore. Or we're going to have to figure out a way to work together. And we decided, the two of us, that it was worth it to figure out a way to work together.
Did you have that explicit conversation?
No, we weren't not that mature. No.
I'm so impressed. Like, so often when I talk with teams, organizations that are dealing with cultural friction or interpersonal friction, one of the things that I notice is that often people fail to explicitly address the core of the challenge. Yeah. And the core of the challenge there of like, look, we're two very different people. We either have to find a way to work through this or it's not going to work. How do we want to do this? Yeah. Like that you got through it the way you did without having that explicit conversation is really extraordinary.
It is. And I think back to it myself. And again, all of my own leadership opportunities that I've had since then, I've learned from how not to do it and to now be more explicit about when challenges arise or where there's tension or things that do need to be worked out. I have much different, more healthy, mature strategies. So the fact that we did go through it and we did, come to be so close is a real testament to us. I think, again, are just sort of Midwest stubbornness more than anything.
And you speak of her today with so much love. It comes through so strongly, like what respect and love and admiration you have for her. Like I mean, you cannot invent
No.
a bonding experience like that.
To the point, like, and I'm very, very close to my blood sister. But I've never had the same experience with anyone else in my life. And even, Tara and Joe, who we became quite close to, we had an excellent adventure, but it was not almost dying together and, really depending on each other for our very survival. And, it's one of those things I wouldn't wish a capsize on anyone, but that bond is a very special one that I have with Emily.
It's incredible. And I also just want to acknowledge your parents for supporting you to go back out again, just even emotional support, the ability to recognize that actually what is important here is not security and it's not the known. What is important here is that journey and that exploration, and to support you to go back out there knowing the risks and having, firsthand experience of what it's like to be on the learning end of the risks as they're unfolding for you in real time. That's pretty impressive. And your parents also, you said right at the beginning that, you were out running around and you were like a few miles away or whatever. And the thing that came to mind for me straight away was the just this value of a free range upbringing, the value of letting kids be free range. And not every kid is going to row across the Atlantic and almost capsize and almost die and whatever. But the value of going, actually, you might not have explicitly trained it, but you were training it from the get-go to be self-sufficient and explore and try and learn and risk and fail and do and try things again. So kudos to your parents.
Yeah, I, again, forever respect them and love them for all of the opportunities that they gave me. I would not be the person I am today without them and their love and support.
Amazing. Sarah, I gotta go take a nap. It is such an incredible story. I really, I had this feeling listening to you tell it. There's that movie, it's called Touching the Void, maybe, about these two mountain climbers, and they fall, and one of them falls into a crevasse, and then the guy's there, and his friend is hanging. They're roped together, so his friend's hanging on the rope, and he's anchored himself in, but he has to cut the ropes. His friend fall, and the two guys, like, if you watch this movie, I think it's called Touching the Void. You watch this movie, and the two guys, the movie's a reenactment. And the two actual guys are narrating the movie. And I'm watching this movie with the two actual guys. And even so, I'm like, there's no way they survived this. Like, that's just, it's impossible. And I have the same feeling listening to you. I'm like, there's no way. Like, how does she possibly get through this? And I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad to call you friend. And I'm so glad you were able to join us today.
Feeling is mutual. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. Can you believe that absolutely bananas story? I mean, first of all, it's just a cracking good yarn, right? But you know me, I'm always looking for takeaways. And one of the biggest things that I took from that story was their explicit and deliberate investment in keeping each other's morale up. Like, imagine being in the midst of your darkest hour. You're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on an upturned boat. You don't know if rescue is coming, and you've got the insight to know how valuable and important it is to sing songs and tell jokes. Culture counts. Thanks again for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@kylakolbin.com. And of course, like, subscribe, follow, especially our shiny new social channels. See you on the socials, and see you next week. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Program. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, the Professor, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Rach Engel, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, and me, Kyla Colvin. Thanks for listening.